Hey, what's going on, everybody? This is LB, L to the B. I just decided I would come on here and make a video really quick just because I want to recap some of the things that I've been reading recently. And I'll kind of go over some footnotes. Let's see. Just within the last few that I've read. Let's see what I got with finished. So some of the things that I've been interested in is definitely the gut. I've always had quite a bit of issues with my gut over a lifetime. I mean, it's not like I'm in the worst shape of my gut. I mean, I'm fairly pretty good, but especially of recent because I started to look at different things like gluten and how that might have been affecting my body. But I'm not going to go to that. I just want to regurgitate some things that I recently read so that I hopefully can retain those things because the more you repeat, the more you keep is what I tell my daughter. And half the time we read stuff, but we don't put it into action. I find that putting things into action can be given as a lecture from a professor or anything like that. That's why we like professors of tenure, when they're at colleges and things like that, because they've had this time frame of being able to read information and regurgitate it, and in that process of being able to explain it, also become more educated. It's weird how it happens, but the framework of the programming, which it's always programming that we go under when we read books and we regurgitate, or we have to produce the results of what we read, or whatever the results of what we experienced or what we learned. So the programming happens with the response. I don't have any books to echo that, but I hope that makes sense, because if you've ever found it the case where you've just been reading, and then you didn't apply anything that you read, and then later on tried to manifest that knowledge, you probably found it with great difficulty. It's almost as if it didn't even matter until it mattered. So, and even then, is it really prevalent, or is it really available for you to use it in those situations? And my answer, I would say, no, it isn't. So we're not going to go into that. Let's see which ones I've read lately. Surrounded by Idiots. I don't know. I think I went over that one briefly. But you see, like that's a perfect example of a book that I went through by Thomas Erickson. Didn't make any video content about it, and I know absolutely nothing about the book. I mean, even the Four Agreements, which I think are pretty good ones, I would still need to recap on all of what the Four Agreements are. So we just don't intuitively run around after we read something with our knowledge and logic. And that's the whole purpose of making this video, is to hopefully make some of this stuff stick. All right, here's a good one. All right, John Levy, You're Invited. And I'm, of course, going to go back into this, see what kind of the recap's about, so I'll know what it is that I'm going to be speaking on. Okay, so I actually like this one quite a lot, and it should be in my library because it's a good one. So the book You're Invited by John Levy, it discusses basically community. Without me going too deep into that, community is, in this author's sense, it's ideal, it's necessary, and you can get a lot of benefits out of it. One of the things he echoes in his book is you don't want too similar or dissimilar group. You kind of want to have that happy marriage. And you also want to create things where people can become more interconnected, that people are inclusive. And there tends to be this connection with people feeling closely motivated in a group to one where they feel more contributing to that group as opposed to receiving gifts. The other thing is that inside a community and groups, the more seriousness the foundation can be made, which you want a good sturdy foundation in anything in life, the more sustainable that community or group's going to be going into the future. So the reason I like this book quite a lot is it talks a lot about the community aspect, and I feel like that's going to be something that's going to be important going forward in the future with a lot of us, we're gonna have to have community. Now, forgive me, I'm gonna be looking. I can't even see what my timestamp is for how long this video is, but let's see if there's maybe no. Oh well. Anyways, going forward into the future, we have to really reflect on also who it is we're spending our time with. So that also has a direct influence. And that's not really into the book, but you do want to have like-minded individuals to a certain extent. And then beyond that, building that framework. But yeah, like I said, it also is contingent, the community is contingent on having weekly or repeatable sessions. You don't want to just do one, everybody got together, they had a good time, and then everyone leaves, and then they're, when we're going to do it again, there's nothing definite. Well, all these little different things make for a loose community. So there's no real structure. So the idea is that you really have to firm up something. Or if you have a good foundation of flexibility, that's important too. But it's the strength is in the consistency, it seems. Yeah, I'm not going to go off on any more of those because it was interesting, and I could have swore I read some more books beyond that, but it's not important for what I really want to make. The rest of my attention or direction went after that towards the gut. And so I've read into 3 books right now, one by Julia Enders. The book's called Gut. And I think it's kind of a series. There's a lot of people that talk about the gut. And like I said, these are the ones that I finished right here, but I have more than I just read. I kind of went through quite a bit. And then Follow Your Gut by Rob Knight and Brendan Buehler. And Missing Microbes by Martin Blasser. So these books tend to refer to the gut, and see if I can come up with some good little bullet points here. So the main thing that I've noticed, especially since stopping gluten, is how my brain's activity has increased. Not even just only that, it's overall my health, my vibrance, my energy. And there's probably a couple other combinations in my life that I've also done to create this outcome. But the removal of gluten was a huge one. I have to say it was like a major one. And then from there, everything just compounds as far as like good health. But a lot of people say that, or at least based from what I can read online, is that when you have gluten and it's disturbing, your intestinal walls, that you have, of course, bacteria that leaks out into the bloodstream, and of course you have species, you have loose stool. And so I experienced pretty much every single symptom of a gluten intolerant person. I was like, well, I don't, if what I'm doing, I can do the opposite. Let's see what the outcome is. And the outcome was opposite. All my body has started feeling a whole lot better. But this is like a catch-22 when it comes to like the microbiome. From what I've read in these few books here that I mentioned, is that, and they don't really discuss it, but it's there in their underlying message, is that, of course, the biome, our gut biome, is very sensitive. So when you introduce elements that, let's say it's an antibiotic, because one author, he kind of gave some positive attention to antibiotics, and antibiotics get a lot of bad rap. So I applaud the author for even taking the opposite viewpoint and kind of giving some support there. And his points were that you have things like typhoid and maybe even other plagues that happened back in time, where people were very close knit. So let's say big cities, things like that, people would get together and they would communicate, and all of these different microbes would exchange. And if there was a bad pathogen that landed, let's say somebody showed up, and this happened quite a bit because people were just not as integrated as they are now. But there would be those times where someone outside the village would show up. They would be bringing their level of healthy microbes with them, and there would be some kind of exchange. whatever it may be, and then it would introduce us into the populace of the new culture wherever this person's attending, and the outcome or the results would be, um, so a lot of times death. The Black Plague is a good example, where something outside of the area was introduced and it spread so rapidly because it was such a tight community. Well, the solution to all that, and the way this author phrased it, was in the 1940s with the invent of antibiotics. So antibiotics does a couple of things. Of course, it helps remove those bad pathogens, but at a cost to what is already sustained into the body. So at the healthy implementation, now here's an even more interesting thing that one of these books discuss, and I'm not sure which one it is at the moment. Like I said, I've read a few books right now on the gut, but one of the books entertains that when you do something like antibiotics, and a lot of us have been here. I've been here multiple times, which makes me really, really try to take another view back into my gut and understand like what may be happening or where I might be affected going long term. But we've all been in a situation where, or a lot of us have, where we've taken antibiotics, and we started taking them. We felt better, or we just didn't even think we really even needed to take them, or you might even felt worse taking the antibiotic. And so the doctor says, make sure you continue to take this in its entirety. Don't ever stop. Well, the book says that when you do not complete a full regimen of an antibiotic, in our minds, we're thinking more of something means more of that undesirable outcome, or more of it may lead to an undesirable outcome if you're already feeling better. Well, that's not always a correct line of thinking, because what happens is that this antibiotic, when it's not allowed its complete cycle, or whatever you want to call it, it gets a chance to wreak havoc inside of the intestinal walls, and it will start to destroy other microbes. It actually will give it arms and legs, and just gives it much more strength, because there's nothing en route in that next battery of antibiotics that would help alleviate its activity inside of the gut, if that makes sense. So what we end up doing is we allow something that we want there to do its job, but we want it to continue to do its job. And what happens is we let it run amok, and it ends up tearing up everything. So you can have a lot of bad reactions to that. There's actually been times where people have consumed antibiotics, and this means even after its entirety, because again, antibiotics do ruin your gut bacteria a lot. And so some people were going and drinking a certain type of prebiotic, or not a probiotic milk, but an antibiotic milk, something that had antibiotics in it. A lot of the milks do, whole milk or what have you from farmers. And so they were consuming this along with after having the antibiotics. And what they found was that almost that doubling or tripling of effects, these people were 5 times more likely to get another serious disease, because their immune system was so deflated from the antibiotics. And then coupled with the antibiotics from the dairy, it just totally raised the level of potential infectious diseases 5 times likely. And a lot of cases, it led to death for those people. And they were just able to kind of isolate that group to the side. And they have a whole little study thing about it. I think it happened in 1985, if I remember right. Can't remember the study, but I know that would be helpful. I'm not making a video for that. I'm making a video just to see what I can remember after the content. And hopefully it makes it stick. Things I found relative. But anyways, that's on the antibiotic part of it. But beyond that, we have to understand that prebiotics and probiotics, that's another thing I really want to kind of get around. So in probiotics, we have things we're trying to introduce to our gut that hopefully can resonate within the gut, do certain functions, yada, yada. But the thing is so interesting is that these microbes have such a powerful effect in our behavior. So that's another thing that we tend to think, is that our gut is isolated. It has nothing else. It has no other purpose beyond it just filtering out our poop or filtering out our nutrients and giving us that and then pooping out the waste. It's our factory. But no, it's much bigger and stronger than that, especially when you introduce things like the vagus nerve, and that connection and how it connects through into the body, into the intestines, and how those nutrients are absorbed, reuptake to the brain. So there's certain microbes that can pass through the blood-brain barrier, or at least ways they can pass into the brain. You can at least get some kind of connection there. I believe one of them is like tyrosine is one that can pass in there, and I can't remember the other one, but I know for sure tryptophan. So tryptophan and tyrosine are the two that can really make it on into the brain and influence function. So a lot of times this is happening all the time. We don't even understand the mechanisms for the circuitry, but it happens. In the cases like tryptophan, a lot of people get sleepy after they've consumed it. Turkey or whatever. People are familiar with this that have tryptophan experiences. And then you have something like tyrosine, does the opposite, and you might feel an uplift in energy. So I know after I eat steak, which typically has a lot of tyrosine in it, I get that effect. Anyways, but the gut has all its combinations and all that stuff. It's neither here nor there. So probiotics were trying to introduce something into the gut that influences behavior. There was one study that showed that in rats, there's this type of, rats are totally adverse to cat pee, right? They do not like cat urine. But if you give them this organism and it allows to take hold or take hold in the environment of the rat, they actually become attracted to the scent. It influences the rat's behavior to go where the cat's urine is at. So that's how strong microbes and these organisms are in the body. I mean, to give you an idea of how influential bacteria and microbes are in your living, is you can understand that when we're in the amniotic sac, in our developmental process, we're 100% human at that point. We're functioning within that sac, we're protected by it, everything is encapsulated in there. But as soon as that breaks and we're exposed to the environment, or the biome, what have you, we instantly take on 90% of microbes. And that's important because that's the cell structure. So it says 90% of the cells consist of microbes. So we're talking about a cellular level, cellular activity, cell, body. What we're composed of, our composition, is 90% microbes. And I try to make emphasis to that because we put a lot of emphasis on water and we say, well, we're 70% water, or we're this or that in our blood and all this. 90% microbes. So to eliminate and destroy that, or to even cause adverse attention there, precludes to something potentially devastating to the body. And so it seems like in life we really just need to have these healthy exchanges. We're probably far better equipped to handle a life that is a mixture of being densely to not densely populated. And why do I say that? Because when you're involved in a big group, you take on all of that, the different bacterium and all that's one exchange, but there also needs to be the time to have separation from that so that you're not constantly inundated with maybe different exchanges of microbes at that point. And then you can start to build your system in that way at a certain resonance of wherever that locale is. But that's just my opinion. I don't, and there's not really a whole lot of merit to it, but I'm seeing the sensitivities of how microbes can influence people. And so what these three books have shined the light on for me is how important the microbes are, and I was talking about probiotics. Well, the prebiotics are another thing. And the prebiotics are good for the sense like you want to feed the good bacteria in your gut. Like mind you, I listed something that was a type of microbe that for the rats, whenever they consumed, they were attracted to cat urine. So if we can find and isolate certain microbes, we can have an experience, or we can have a change in our behavior that might be more conducive. So one might have an idea of, well, what are the microbes that help us live longer? What are the microbes that help give me motivation? One of the things, and this has become kind of a placebo argument, is that the prebiotics that feed the good bacterium in the gut, or maybe they just feed certain bacteria. I don't want to say it's a good or bad, but at least they give some kind of conductive energy, actually creates motivation. But again, that's more placebo type result when people do studies and things of that like. But the idea here is that if we can start isolating different microbes that we can introduce into our body that doesn't upset everyone, right, can integrate and make ourselves more whole and give us more capability to conduct certain behaviors. Maybe we get motivated. We know that when certain rats consume different microbes from, let's say, an obese rat or something like that, that rat will also become fat. Or if they consume, if obese rats consume something that a more healthy rat has, or anorexic rat has, then they'll lose weight. So these gut type, the gut does influence either certain behavior or even certain environmental exchanges within the biome that create certain results. But for the most part, it's the idea that you get prebiotics that help build the intestinal walls so that hopefully you absorb more nutrients and you just have an overall better lifestyle. But if we get asked the questions, what microbes should I take to make me a successful individual? What microbes do I take for me to be a better listener? What microbes might I take to help me improve my reading ability? What microbes may I take so that I become a better parent, or I have more energy, or what's some other ideas that you might have for your life? What's a microbe that might help with, have an imagination and illustration and be a better art person? What types of things do I want to achieve in my brain and my mind? And what microbes might help facilitate that? There's a lot of different things you can go in that direction, but microbes might be one of the things you pay attention to in route or in quest to get there. And that's the discovery I'm making in my own life, is that these microbes are pretty powerful stuff that can have an influence on decision making, and getting the right balance and one not compromising the other is of course important. A lot of this is important in retrospect to how we treat ourselves with masks, and what types of results that occurs, from us continuously breathing certain harmful bacterium from our mouth, and preventing other commensal bacteria from exchanging with our gut. So there's a lot of concern that somebody should have when it comes to something like how much they should be taking in, as far as like the wrong kind of gut, the wrong kind of bacterium, or if they're wearing a mask that's continuously filled with this stuff. You don't have to think too hard about it. Most people can pretty much pick up that, when you wear a mask, you've got tons of bacteria on it. I mean, there's no question. Just walking through the fabric's going to attract so much. And then from you breathing, that's going to have an effect. And then that's not necessarily optimal effect for your immune system, because we know that's all tied in with the gut. So that's it. That's all I want to do was kind of, spin on that for a little bit so that I can keep some of this knowledge and logic. And hopefully I'll keep making my own little videos on content I read. Because again, that's how the programming happens. Whenever you sit down in a class and you learn from the instructor, or he gives you knowledge, and then he says, now we're going to take a test. We're going to take a quiz. And we're going to ask these questions. Da-da-da-da-da. Da-da-da. It's testing your knowledge. Well, anytime that the person goes back in to recall and bring it forth to produce it in some manner of action, you can then get a confirmation for hopefully some knowledge, some logic that you've learned, and education and programming. But anyways, that's it. I got to take this phone call. Thanks.